Good evening. Thank you for joining us at the Whaling Museum this evening for our lecture. My name is Jocelyn Wong. I am the Director of Community Engagement here at the Nantucket Historical Association. So some of you know that our special exhibition for this year focuses on the work of a man named Tony Sarg, an illustrator, animator, puppeteer, entrepreneur, among many other things. And tonight we will hear from my colleague, Michael Harrison, about Tony Sarg's connection to Nantucket and the sea monster hoax that Sarg orchestrated in 1937. I'm delighted to introduce my colleague, Michael Harrison, the NHA's Chief Curator and Obed Macy Research Chair. He has held curatorial positions at the National Building Museum, the Smithsonian's National Museum of American History, and the Glasgow Museum of Transport. He is the author of numerous books and articles, as well as nearly 70 historical reports on maritime, architectural, and engineering topics for the U.S. National Park Service's Heritage Documentation Programs. He is a graduate of the University of Pennsylvania and holds a master's degree in museum studies from George Washington University. Please welcome my esteemed colleague, Michael Harrison.
Thank you, Jocelyn. Welcome, everybody. We're excited to be here. We're super excited this year to have the Tony Sarg Genius at Play exhibition featured up in the McCausland Gallery. A fantastic show put together in part through our colleagues at the Norman Rockwell Museum and then our own staff here, adapting the show and, bringing the story of Tony Sarg to everybody here. So what we want to dip into tonight is one story out of his long career and out of his 20-year association with Nantucket. And so we're going to start in August of 1937. And we're going to start with this article from the Enquirer and Mirror newspaper. Just like today, the Enquirer was published once a week in 1937 on Saturdays. And they reported from this, a sea monster. Bill Manville may have solved the problem of why the bluefish have been fighting shy of Nantucket waters this season. He says there is some kind of a sea monster hanging around the island that must be keeping the bluefish away. He knows whereof he speaks because he has seen it. And Bill Manville, an amateur fisherman, he describes it as a great big creature with terrible-looking head. It looked greenish, a very strange shade of green. This news appeared in the Enquirer and Mirror, and then the Enquirer and Mirror also sent out an Associated Press wire. And so this story was also picked up by some other newspapers around the country. Skip ahead to the following Wednesday. Another wire is sent out by the Enquirer and Mirror, this time through Universal Press, that's picked up among other places by the New York Times. And this story says that Gilbert Manter, another recreational fisherman, has seen the sea monster while fishing for bluefish off Smith's Point. He says it was something like 120 feet long and stood up to 12 feet out of the water. It looked like a combination snake and whale with a head much bigger than the neck. The New York Times then editorialized, one of the most tragic features of Nantucket's sea serpent scare is that this island town has no chamber of commerce through which to capitalize on the publicity. Editor Henry B. Turner, however, appears to be doing a noble job pinch hitting for the non-existent Chamber of Commerce. So then, and that's the article that you see here from the New York Times, and then the other article that's here is the second Saturday of our story, August 14th. The I&M reports that during the previous week, footprints have been found on the beach. On Tuesday, Gilbert Manter and his friend Ed Crocker went to Nantucket to see if they could see the sea serpent. And they found these footprints. Giant webbed foot tracks, 66 inches by 45. This brought forward a summer resident who said, hey, I've seen some footprints too, also on the South Shore. Those are these footprints. This went out also and was reported in numerous papers that all of these sightings and things are going on. So then, so we're at Saturday. The following week, on Wednesday, there's a spoil sport story that goes out on Associated Press, and it's picked up in the Boston. Well, there's actually this before it, saying that fishermen are going to go out looking for the sea serpent, hunting for the sea serpent. And then we have the spoil sport story, asserting babies have been frightened by the thought of a sea monster lurking off the island's shores. State Representative William T. Swain condemned what he called a scheme to infiltrate a balloon 130 feet long and designed to resemble a monster and label it the famous Nantucket sea serpent. And he then says that a national commercial firm is looking to cash in on this publicity. This story was apparently broken by a reporter in New Bedford at one of the newspapers there. I don't have a copy of that story, but they're starting to say, well, wait a minute, a sea monster, no, this must be something else going on. So the very day that this story comes out, actually the next day after this story comes out, this appears in the harbor. But of course, since the Inquirer Mirror only publishes on Saturday and there was no Nantucket Current at the time, nobody could really figure out what this was. This was all happening out toward Coatue. Nothing came to the mainland, but just sort of out at Coatue. Then the next day, island citizens woke up to this. And what do you know? It's a giant balloon. Just as was foretold by our spoil sports off island, this is 125 feet long, giant green sea serpent with teeth, with painted eyes that you can't see in this view, some scales, big fins off the back, lying on the beach. You can just make out between, let me see if I can do this. This is one of the helium tanks. This is the helium tank. Anytime you see these pictures, the next time you're on the Steamship Authority boats and they got these pictures and stuff, look for the helium tanks. They're all over the beach. And this strange creature is the work of this man, Tony Sarg. Here he is, smiling, surrounded by kids and assistants. And this was his idea, to bring a balloon to Nantucket, to have some fun, not necessarily to drum up business for a certain department store or elsewhere, but to bring fun to Nantucket, possibly to increase sales at his local shop, but not necessarily, and maybe to raise some money for the hospital if possible. So who's Tony Sarg? Many of you may already know, but for anybody who doesn't know, I'm going to give a quick introduction here. This is the back of a flyer sent out by the management agency that represented him around 1930-31, telling about all of the different things that he is. So he's an eminent artist. He's an author of many books for children. He's the illustrator, originator and creator of Sarg's marionettes, producer of balloon pageants for the holidays. We'll get back to that one. He has designed the Tony Sarg wallpaper, designed the Tony Sarg silks, designed the Tony Sarg rugs, manager of the Tony Sarg souvenir chain stores, better known as the Tony Sarg shops. And it goes on and on. He was a multifaceted, creative individual. Started off as an illustrator, took on an interest in puppeteering and marionette performance, founded touring marionette shows here in the United States, got into design, was always looking for things that might sell, that might make money, but was a very sort of generous soul, always interested in performing and doing things for charity, working with children. Through his grandmother, he had an enormous collection of historic toys, which influenced a lot of his work and certainly provided inspiration. He's surrounded by things from that here. Now, in particular, he was known as a marionette performer, and in some ways a marionette impresario, setting in motion these elaborate puppet performances that toured across the country. And here are some of his puppets. This is a set of puppets from one of the last new production that his company did in the late 1930s. This is Robin Hood, all the characters from Robin Hood. Don't be thrown off by the gentleman holding the skull. This is not Hamlet. But the Bishop of Hereford from the the Robin Hood stories. So he's known for this, and from his fame, he's hired in 1923 by R.H. Macy and Company in New York to do holiday windows on their Herald Square store. And that's his first interaction with them. The next year, 1924, they founded their Christmas parade. And he designed additional windows that year, as well as then floats for that inaugural parade. In 1927, he designed and they introduced inflated characters held up on poles in the parade. And then 1928, the first helium-filled parade balloons appeared. And he contributed he designed all the balloons and through the early 1940s when he passed away. And then in 1929, his balloon designs also started appearing in a Christmas parade that was sponsored in Boston by the Jordan Marsh department store. So the drawing that's here, which is from our collection, is one of the balloons for the Jordan Marsh parade, which was called the Santa Sun Parade, because Santa's son would arrive by airplane on the Cambridge River and then be paraded through Boston. So there's balloons in New York, there's balloons in Boston. He's designing them, and we'll get in a minute to where they're being made. So here we have some scenes from the 1927 parade. Let me see if I can get this to run. There we go. So notice the heads, the sort of papier-mâché heads. Animals, so taking live animals out of the parade that might scare children and putting in, whether these are less scary is up to you. But we see clowns and figures, this enormous head, the pigs, and then we're going to get to a float here in a second. Imagine walking on Broadway wearing that. So this is a puppet stage, and this is a Sarg design. And then here we have heads sticking out and these little dancing marionettes. And then we get our first turkey, and it goes on and on. So this is 1927. As I said, the first parade was 1924. It was originally called the Macy's Christmas Parade, and from 1931 on to today, it's called the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade. And here are some of the balloons. We're going to sample balloons from 1933. This is in the giant airship hangar in Akron at the Goodyear Tire and Rubber Company. These were made out of rubber, glued together, hand-painted, filled with air here for demonstration purposes, but then filled with helium at the parade route to float down Broadway. The giant figure here is Gulliver the Gullible, who is hanging from a rope from the ceiling, because he's not filled with helium, he's only filled with air. And in an interview with one of the Akron newspapers, Sarg describes this as a sky marionette, which is a fantastic description. These balloons are often referred to as upside-down marionettes, a quote from Bill Baird, another puppeteer who worked with Sarg and went on to a fabulous career of his own. But this sort of sky marionette comes directly from Sarg's mouth himself. Here's a close-up. That's Tony Sarg right there in the front with Tom the cat, also known as Tomcat, depending what sources you look at. The elephant, the little rabbit. There were these weird fish. This is the weird fish. I say it's weird because it looks weird there, but you turn around, it's got its giant grinning face. Here's Gulliver's head with his ear painted on. The elephant. And then here is a view of, this is the 1936 parade. So we're going to jump ahead to the 1936 parade, and you will see why in a moment. So this is one of the floats. This is Jack the Beanstalk the Giant. Jack is standing on his chest. This is the two-headed pirate. Here's the giant again. This is a float, not a balloon. Two-headed pirate. This is the pirate ship. The Indian. This was the second year the Indian appeared. Noah's Ark or some such. Giant heads again. Weird tiger. And then there were a series of these floats, the snake charmer, the chivalrous knight, marching bands. This is Santa and the roof and the reindeer pulled by horses. And there we are. This may look familiar. So this 1936 is the 13th Christmas parade, and this balloon that we know from the beach, this was its first time that it appeared, and it was a dragon. It was not a sea monster, but it was a dragon. Let's see how much longer we got. Here he comes again, around Columbus Circle. Made up in different sections, so the head is one section, the neck is one section. You can see the little connections. Giant body with the tail. So pretty great. So there were 5 giant balloons in the 1936 parade. This tall figure here with the hat, this is Father Knickerbocker, and this was his first time in the parade. The Indian, which was on the film, this is his second time in the parade. Two-headed pirate, first time. The dragon, first time, you can see him in green. And then the turkey, the second time. So these balloons would be used, the initial, sort of first 20 years of balloons, they're used 1, 2, or 3 times, but they're not really used much after that. They're surprisingly fragile, and they get holes in them, and they deteriorate. And so they sort of have a limited life. But we see in 1936 the green dragon. This is, in fact, not Sarg's first dragon balloon. Here he is again at Columbus Circle with Santa in front. Here are 2 other Sarg dragon balloons. The sepia picture, this is Tiamat, the dragon from 1931. There's a very long balloon. And then the upper one, I think this is the 1933 Smiling Green Dragon that was made for the Santa Sun Parade in Boston. This is a 1938 picture of it, so could be a different one, but might be the same one. One thing I'll get to that in a second. Talk about our green friend here for a minute. So he's painted green. He's 125 feet long, contains 8,300 cubic feet of air or helium, takes 50 handlers, and reputedly took half an hour to inflate. So these are a big deal, and they're made out of rubber. They're shipped from Akron, as I already said, and that's why there's only like five of them. They can't handle any more than that. And then there's all these other parade elements to go with them. So it's sort of putting our little dragon in context. Here is another film, so you can see. Here's Father Knickerbocker, same green, coming down Broadway. It's amazing how they sort of waft about. Here, I love these, because he'll hove into view in a moment. There he is. The old woman who lived in the shoe. Here's the giant. There's the Indian. More parade floats. There's a lot of floats. There's a lot of bands, a lot of people on horseback. Here's the Indian going by again. The elephant. Turkey. Sorry, we'll get to our payoff in a second. There he is. Isn't that incredible? Yeah, so they're pretty great. There we go. So here he is again, coming down into Herald Square. So this brings us back to Nantucket. So the way the story is usually told is that the sea monster hoax, sea monster appears here, and then he appears in the 1937 Thanksgiving Day Parade. And it turns out that he's in the 1936 Thanksgiving Day Parade, and then brought to Nantucket. And he's originally a dragon, and then in 1937 in the parade, he's rebranded as a sea monster. And he's rebranded specifically as a Nantucket sea monster, and in some sources, he's called Morton. So we have these balloons. Sarg is designing these. He's working with the folks in Akron to produce these. He's got bevies of artists realizing his designs, painting these, maintaining them on the parade route as they spring leaks and do weird things. But he has this idea to bring it to Nantucket. This is not the first sea monster associated with Nantucket. And whether Tony Sarg knew that or not, I thought I would divert for a little bit and tell you about one of the most famous previous sea monsters from 1833. So the master of a brig recently arrived at Portland, Maine, avers that he saw the old serpent a few days since, some 20 miles from Cape Cod. We believe it is about the usual season for raising the ghost of this nautical non-entity, the Inquirer says, because every few years there are these reports of people seeing sea creatures that they don't know what they are, and they report them and they appear in the paper. And so there's a Nantucket captain in the 1790s who reports seeing one. There are reports in the newspaper in 1817 of one, and then in May and July of 33, there are people seeing these off Cape Ann. This is off Cape Cod, but most of the sightings this season are off Cape Ann. The Inquirer in July writes, "The news came so credibly attested about one of these sightings that quite an excitement agitated some of our veteran harpooners, and a proposal to go and take him was started yesterday," this is in July, "with what success we have not yet learned." So here we have, from Boston, 2 excursion steamers that set out in July to go take people to see if they could see the sea monster off Cape Ann. Then we have the sea serpent in danger. We understand that a schooner arrived here yesterday from Nantucket in search of the sea serpent. She's manned by real harpooners who have seen the west side of Cape Horn. So here we are. This is from our collection. This is the ship's articles agreeing to send the sloop Fame off to hunt the sea serpent in July of 1833. This is a small trading vessel that connects Nantucket to the mainland. It's owned by 3 local merchants. All 3 of them agree that the vessel can be hired out for this purpose in exchange for a payment out of the proceeds of whatever is saleable from what they get. They hire Peter Myrick, an experienced captain, a couple mates, and a crew, totaling 14 people total. Now, as many of you will know, in Nantucket whaling, it is traditional to sign aboard for a percentage of the final profit. You're not paid wages, you're paid a percentage at the end. But some whalers, if whalers signed on in the Pacific for the last part of a voyage or for certain parts of it, it was also customary to sign on for like a certain amount a month if you didn't think that you were going to get much percentage. And so it's a little hard to read here, but the list at the bottom of the left-hand side, these are the investors in the scheme. And then the list of men on this side is the crew, with 3 overlaps. There's 3 investors who are also crewmen. And many of the crewmen sign up for pay of $15 a month because they probably know something and they don't want to not get paid. This, also from our collection, is one of the account sheets from this. These are some of the expenses of the voyage. And this reflects that the guys who said, $15 a month, please, got paid pretty well for this little voyage. And those who didn't say that got paid less. So everybody was paid different amounts. Strangely, they were only out for about a week and a half. They sailed up to Boston. They caught a porpoise, a type of porpoise that at the time was referred to as a puffing pig. which is actually just a bay porpoise, which they ate. They didn't bring it back, so there was nothing to sell. And so this was a total loss of money. Whatever they had to do to outfit the thing and spend for that, which included a barrel of cider and a lot of pork, they didn't make anything from it. One of the noteworthy things about this is they did actually carry experimental harpoons armed with prussic acid, which was an innovation just beginning to be experimented with by whalers at this time. Whalers did not like this innovation because prussic acid is extremely deadly, and if you make a mistake with these harpoons, you kill your crew. But William Coffin Jr. of Nantucket had recently had done a patented design for harpoons that used this. He had them made up in Providence, and they were taken on this voyage and not tested because they didn't find the sea serpent. So this brings us then to 1937, back where we started, and our balloon has been in the parade and then is shipped to Nantucket. And as you remember, the spoil sports were like, this is just a publicity stunt for Macy's. This is a report, this was another sort of Associated Press kind of report that went out that said, you know, this reporter, Indio from New Bedford, spilled the beans, said it was a stunt, but the people associated with the hoax thought it was just a good idea and, you know, would help publicize the island. So Tony Sarg obviously was behind this, but he was not alone in doing this, and he was assisted financially by Florence Lang. And Florence Lang was a summer resident. She was from New Jersey. She was a prominent summer resident of Nantucket. She was the sort of financial founder of the artist colony. And she's the one who bought the little sheds along the waterfront and had them fixed up as summer accommodations for artists. She opened the Easy Street Gallery. She paid for that. And she and her husband owned the Island Service Company, which existed to keep working Nantucket going in the off-season, and ran the lumber yard and the coal yard and all of this. And she was a major benefactor of the island. And so it is not a surprise, I guess, to see her name come in with Tony Sarg's in bringing the balloon to Nantucket. And I wanted to just fill in a few more details about what they did. So they brought the balloon, and they seem to have had some kind of idea. We don't have a written thing from Sarg that says, this is what I planned. But we have enough photographs to sort of piece it together. He seems to have thought that maybe they could float it across the harbor. And so they took it to Cotu in a motorboat. So here's the motorboat. Here's this dory. They've loaded the head only of the balloon into the dory, plus a lot of helium tanks. And they've taken it over to Cotu. And this is them. Here's Tony Sarg. Here's his assistants. This is them unrolling the head of the balloon. Here's obviously rowing it. So anybody who's ever been over to Cotu, you feel like you're on a Pacific atoll. You know, nothing, no one, it's empty, it's beautiful. And imagine taking a giant green rubber balloon over there and helium tanks and inflating it. And then trying to put it on the water. So they started with it upside down. These are the ears and the tongue flailing out there. They did get it turned over, seemingly with the help of the dory. And then here's the picture we saw earlier of the wacky head on the water. So they didn't bring the rest of the body over. They only floated this. As far as I can tell, they didn't bring it all the way across to the mainland. Then overnight, it rested on a floating platform off of Washington Street, a beach known as the South Beach, which no longer exactly exists. It's been covered with buildings. But if you sort of think of where the Maria Mitchell Aquarium was until over the winter, that's the space you want to imagine. So here they are. Here's the floating platform and the dory again, and they're loading the balloon off the platform into the dory and bringing it ashore. Apparently, the main body of the balloon did develop some leaks, and they took it to a boatyard that was right here at South Beach and had it repaired in the boatyard. Potentially, that's why they didn't take the whole body across, but I think their dory might not have been big enough, although here they're using the same dory. Anyway, here we are again. Giant green balloon on the beach for the day. Helium tanks everywhere. And so everybody turned out. Everybody came to see this, to get their kids photographed with the balloon. Really just wacky, big, enormous thing. So it has its big splash on Nantucket. It makes everybody feel really happy. Whether it drove any sales to the to the Tony Sarg shop, we don't know. Probably it did. I've never seen any Tony Sarg commercial products that have this dragon drawn on them. It's not to say they didn't exist, but you'd kind of expect to see some if maybe he'd was steering people towards the shop, but who knows? So then later in 1937, we have the parade again, and here's an advertisement from the Daily News in New York of the parade. And one of the balloons in the 1937 parade was this trapeze man hanging from the globe, and that's what's in this advertisement. And then here's Tony Sarg, as it says. Tony Sarg, he designs their balloons. A rare and Terran sea monster, the Nantucket sensation. So it's been completely rebranded. And then the lower quote here, this is from the Brooklyn Eagle, and it actually names it Morton, the Nantucket sea monster, which is pretty great. Here are the balloons in the 1937 parade, and you'll notice that our friend Morton has been painted red. As I said, these balloons didn't last terribly long. They needed repairs. Things would happen to them along the parade route. We don't have any direct documentation that says, well, this is the reason we repainted it. But one can imagine, after shipping it to Nantucket, having it on the beach, having it on the harbor, that it might need to be repainted. So the figures that you see here, this is Pinocchio with his giant nose, the man on the trapeze, Morton, the Nantucket sea monster, and then there's this giant Christmas stocking. That's this thing in the middle. It's an actual stocking filled with toys. It's totally incredible. And then Officer SOS 13 is the policeman here. And I want to stop for a second and talk about him. Here he is. And here's Father Knickerbocker from the year before. These are the same balloon. Father Knickerbocker had a bit of a mishap or two on his way down Broadway. He got his nose caught in an obstruction, which he started losing air, and they had to patch him back together. And then later he lost his arm, hitting another obstruction, and so they actually repaired him and repainted him, took off his coat, changed his hat, and he became Officer SOS 13. Now, the reason he got his nose out of joint is this. This is the elevated track at Lincoln Square. So if you imagine where Lincoln Center is now, that intersection in front of it is Lincoln Square, and there was an elevated train that went through there. All the balloons had to be lowered to the ground and brought under the elevated. And Father Knickerbocker did not do that very well, but our friend Morton did. So let's watch. We'll get back to him. Here's the trapeze again. Here he is. Imagine him painted red. Here he is on the bridge. Womp. Isn't it incredible? We're going to watch, not this one. We're going to watch more. Father Knickerbocker in disguise. I'm throwing in this float because the float's not very interesting, but we get more of Morton after this. Oh, there he is. This is a globe. It's a globe of the world with the trapeze artist hanging below it. Oh, I guess we don't get more and more. Well, there'll be another one. No. Here he is. So this is up in Harlem towards 110th Street, which is where the parade started, where they inflated the balloons. Here he is coming down past Central Park. Here he is rounding a corner. And then back down towards Herald Square. And then he's red. Just amazing. So he appears in the parade in New York only twice. as the Green Dragon in 1936 and as Morton the Nantucket Sea Monster in 1937. Why he's not reused in the Macy's parade is not entirely clear, but he is used 2 more times. This is Boston. This is the Santa Sun Parade in 1938, and he appeared in the 1938 and 1939 parades in Boston. After that, he was scrapped, and the rubber was used for the American War effort. So, as far as I know, there are no pieces of him remaining. I've never seen anybody who had any remaining scraps of the balloon, which would be pretty incredible if anybody had one. But I think the film footage is a pretty great remnant showing just how sort of incredible these things were. You know, and we've all seen these pictures of this balloon on the beach, this sort of incredible giant balloon on the beach. But the thing with the balloon on the beach is it doesn't move. I mean, it probably sways in the wind. But his ears are down on the ground. You know, he's not very animated. His legs are there. You know, you put him in the air, and like everything just sort of organically wafts around. And you kind of imagine being one of these 50 handlers who has to keep him from like crashing into buildings and scraping on the bottom of the bridge. But really just the effect of this is totally incredible. And, you know, amazing that somebody thought, Tony Sarg thought, well, we could just do balloons. We could just have helium balloons that are enormous and impress people. And he designs different ones every year. So there's 4 or 5 new ones every year for not quite 20 years, 15 years from his hand. And then, of course, they continue to this day. And that's for a different lecture. Now, as I said, our exhibition is a partnership with the Norman Rockwell Museum. This is Morton as he appeared at the Norman Rockwell Museum last year. This is a 30-foot replica of the sea monster, which they had on their lawn as an advertisement for their show. Some of you may have heard that Morton's going to make a command appearance here on Nantucket on Monday the 5th, next week. And we have, these are some drawings. Bill Smith, who is a professional balloon maker and designer, has recreated Morton and has been working on it for a number of years. We've had really generous support from Melinda and Paul Sullivan, who are on our board here at the NHA, we're great friends of the NHA, to make this happen and to bring him here for Sarg Community Day on Monday, where we're gonna have a lot of activities and we're gonna have him. And I am not gonna give away more than these sketches, except to show you this one piece. I mentioned how it's sort of made of different pieces. The new balloon is made of separate pieces as well, with this great bold coloring. All in homage to this, and in homage to Tony Sarg. And I'm gonna end it there. I'm happy to answer any questions that anybody might have. We do have a microphone, so there we go.
We saw in New York how many people it took, 50 handlers, and how did he do that on Nantucket with such a small crew? And how did they keep it secret?
They kept it secret from not everybody. So the newspaper was, I should have explained this, the newspaper was completely in on it. I've left that part of the story out, I guess it was so obvious. The newspaper was completely in on this. And the guys at the beach who reported seeing the sea monster, it's just total plants. I mean, I found myself like reading the coverage of this thing. Well, on this day, he saw it. On this, no, wait, no. Nobody saw it. On Saturday, they published this. And on Saturday, they sent out a wire. And then, you know, on the 10th and 11th of August, they went out with this contraption to put footprints on the beach. That was an actual physical thing that happened on specific days. But the newspaper was completely in on it, as were these fishermen. And I don't have a list of all of the local people who helped. I suspect, because Florence Lang was involved, that people with the Island Service Company probably helped with shipping, with unloading, with storing it, and all of that. But we don't know how many people were actually involved. He's staked to the ground on the beach, and he's only filled with enough helium to give him shape. He's not filled with enough helium to actually rise into the air. And they had people there minding. Again, I don't know how many people are there in case it was windy, but he definitely wasn't flying quite as much. But that's a great question, because I left out that part of the story. Anybody else? Yeah, here, hang on a second for the microphone.
Who filmed these scenes at the parade, and where did you find them?
So all of the footage that I've shown has come off of YouTube, and some of it is from commercial film archives or university archives. Others of it is privately held footage. A lot of it, some of it is newsreel footage from different news organizations. There was some coverage of this by Pathé. I didn't show any of the Pathé clips today, but and then there was a fair amount of private handheld camera footage, and that stuff exists mostly in private collections that people have digitized and put up. One of the things I showed, the quality of the film was quite bad. That was like flea market footage that somebody found, and they had it up on YouTube. Most of the color footage, in fact, is private handheld cine footage.
I wonder.
So the question is, how much did it cost to do this, and who funded it? We don't have all the records that would tell us this. I certainly think Florence Lang put money behind this. I wouldn't be surprised if Tony Sarg himself put money behind it. What's not clear, and what could perhaps be answered by going to New York and looking in Macy's archives, is whether Macy's put any money behind this. This is entirely speculation, but I wouldn't be shocked if Sarg convinced Macy's to at least like ship the balloon here and maybe take it back. I don't, actually. It is a huge undertaking. I think the fact that he had this balloon already, I think, helped. Because if something happened to the balloon and they weren't able to use it again, it wouldn't have been as much of a tragedy as if it were a brand new balloon that had never been used, that they'd spent the money on. I haven't actually seen, and this is probably out there somewhere in the news coverage, of what these balloons themselves just cost per balloon, and I don't know that offhand. And they get bigger and bigger. So you just. I don't have that number. Deborah, do you have any idea? No. We have some photographs, all of which are staged, of Sarg and 4 people painting a head. But it's more than that. And a lot of the work is done at the Goodyear plant. And so it's Goodyear's guys, mostly, although not exclusively, who are painting these. But I don't actually have that. I'm sorry? That's also a possibility. It certainly was good advertising for Goodyear, that their rubber products were flexible and long-lasting. Yeah. No, those are great questions and stuff we can definitely look for. Yeah.
You might give briefly the shift to the balloons at the Macy's parade. I mean, wasn't part of it that they used to have animals and the elephants started getting cranky near the end of the parade, and so they had frightened children there?
Yeah, I think that is part of it. And I have read that story. I wasn't able to find an original source for that in this week, but I've definitely read that particularly children would get scared by the animals, and they did have animals in the original few parades. And the balloons are certainly like easier to control. And of course, we don't have the balloons first. We have these like heads and these like floats, and there's a lot of animal figures in them, but it's probably related to that. It's a lot easier to have a dachshund that's 20 feet long on poles than to like have elephants that you have to walk down the street. Yeah.
Did he live here on the island? Did he have a home here?
Yes. So Tony Sarg was based in New York, but he and his wife and their daughter lived on Nantucket summers for 20 years. They came here starting in 1920, and in 1921 bought a house on North Liberty Street. And then he passed away in 42, and his wife sold the house the next year. And his wife and daughter remained associated with Nantucket after that. But yeah, for 20 years he was very popular, and he was very much a sort of part of the summer scene. He knew a lot of people who were from the New York contingent that came here. He right away took part in charity events to benefit the hospital. He was a presence at the summer fetes. He was a presence at the Waterfront Festival when that was held. He was very much here and well known. Yeah. Yeah.
What do you know about the balloon that's going to float on August 5th?
So the balloon, which is what I showed a little preview. So Bill Smith, who makes balloons professionally, has wanted to do a reproduction of the Morton balloon for many years, and had not had quite the reason to do it or the financial backing to do it. So our exhibition is actually providing the excuse to do it. And he's produced it in the Midwest where he lives. Or is it New Jersey? Sorry, I have that wrong. Pennsylvania, that's it. And it's being shipped here. It's arriving tomorrow. And it's here specifically for Sarg Community Day on Monday. And there's a preview of it at our gala on Saturday out at Bartlett Farm. So it's here entirely because we are doing this exhibition and we're celebrating Tony Sarg. And in the minds of Nantucketers, I think the sea monster looms as like the most readily accessible story from Sarg. You know, if you've sort of heard of him, you know he invented these balloons, and you know that one of them came here. And so we're excited to bring one of them here, even if it's not the original one, because it doesn't exist anymore. Please turn out. I mean, we're really excited about Monday's events. What's the timing?
So there will be a Morty appearance from 10 to 3 o'clock at Children's Beach.
Yeah, Children's Beach. And there are activities in the morning. There's going to be a parade, little parade,
Yep.
within the Children's Beach precinct. Yeah, people who are making crafts and making different things will get to, the kids will get to parade around doing that. And then, yeah, the balloon is there until 3 o'clock.
3 o'clock.
That's it.
All right, well, one round of applause for Michael. Thank you for that informative talk and getting us all pumped about Morton. So we hope to see you all out at Children's Beach on Monday, 10 to 3 o'clock, and be a part of this momentous occasion. And maybe that photograph that you take with Morty will eventually be in the NHA archives and featured in a future exhibition. I want to encourage you all to see the exhibition if you have not already done so, Tony Sarg Genius at Play. It's up in our McCausland Gallery, and there are also satellite exhibitions at Hadwin House and our research library. So please see that and get excited for our Sarg Community Day on Monday. Thank you all.
Thank you.